first item of business is public comment. Almost got you by surprise, huh? I believe we have somebody.
It'll probably be reported later, but I did want to report that the City Council yesterday approved the ordinance changes to the item 22, 22 the historic landmarks and relating to putting all the, having all the extensions for every board and commission be in line. I suggested, but it was not followed up on, that there be some kind of review when when projects, when applicants ask to extend their project. And so I would ask, maybe this commission could make some, though it was not part of the ordinance, some condition, some update, so that you will know that projects that applicants have asked that projects that you have either given preliminary review or final review have been extended by the staff. And though it would mean you would have some, you and the public would have some update and not have projects that you thought had gone away come back like from the dead, like characters in some B horror movie. The other question I have is, this commission going to weigh in or make any comment to the Plan Santa Barbara that's going on right now? I was there this morning before the Planning Commission, and they're going on till 3 o'clock this afternoon, and they'll probably continue it until tomorrow. But and the 17th is the cutoff date. So I would just like to know, or is it the province of this committee to make comments on that plan? Thank you.
Callum, just so you know, we did have the presentation last meeting, and
yes,
we were requested to send our comments before
yeah,
the 17th, and so we've been given the discs, and we have, if we wanted them, the paper things.
It's quite
that it would take 3 hours.
2 discs.
Yes. And I said more than 3 hours to go through everything, and I think that's what it is, that individually we will be sending our comments.
But not as a group?
Not as a group.
Okay.
I don't think so. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, shall we go to the approval of the minutes for April 14th, 2010? So moved. Second. Are there any comments or revisions?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
On page 4, under the miscellaneous action items, about 10 lines up from the bottom, it says the board is requested to forward recommendations. It should be the commission.
Yeah. Thank you.
And on page 9, item D, it says the Elks Club building. Is that correct? Yes. And it wasn't Montgomery Ward's, or was that? It was Elks Club first. Okay. But if it says Lloyd's Bank, it may want to refer also to Montgomery Ward's. But anyway. just a thought. That's all I have.
Okay. Any other comments or revisions? Mr. Suding?
Just a couple. Good job on the minutes. Page 6, item 4 under the motion number 2. I propose that should read, any trim color shall match existing building color.
In addition to?
No, and change that sentence, number 2, to say, any trim color shall match existing building color.
Okay.
Just a little bit more clear.
Well, does that include windows? I think we were just talking about the parapet.
Okay. The parapet trim color then shall match existing building. Good point. And page 7, item 5.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, and Commissioner Suding, would you please, I'm trying, without pulling out the plan and looking at that, was it the parapet trim color that, because they did have some trim color changes, didn't they?
They were
Otherwise-
proposing
They were
to paint the
proposing,
parapet
we don't
trim
want it.
a different color, and
Okay.
we said to keep it the same, the parapet trim the
so-
same color.
Okay, so what you're saying
The
is,
parapet trim color shall match the existing building color. Does that make sense to everybody?
Or you could say all plaster elements or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it was a little,
It was also that shelf
That
underneath
bowl,
the
yeah.
niche. Okay, so all plaster trim color shall match existing building color. Gosh, I thought.
thank you.
Page 7, item 5. Under the motion number 3, revisit the shape of the proposed roof pots, perhaps using a finial or plaster treatment.
Yes, thank you.
And that is all.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments?
Mr.
Revisions?
Michelle? No comments? No comments?
All those in favor of approving the minutes as amended?
Aye.
Opposed? I have one abstention, Ms. Murray. Next item of business is the consent calendar.
Yes, Madam Chair, item A, 1036 State Street was final approval as noted. Item B, 2300 Garden Street was final approval as submitted, and those were reviewed by Commissioner Sharp.
May I have a motion?
I'll make that motion. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained, that motion carries. The next item of business are announcements.
Yes, Madam Chair, project at 228 East Victoria Street, which was continued 2 weeks to today's meeting, was postponed 2 additional weeks at the architect's request. An appeal of the Historic Landmarks Commission's action on the project at 517 Chapala Street will be heard by the City Council at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, June 22nd. We will need somebody to represent the commission, preferably one from the prevailing side and one from the non-prevailing side. Do we have any volunteers? I know, but we have vacations coming up, and it's June 22nd at 2 p.m. And I don't want it to get so close that then nobody can make it. So I think I'll ask again in 2 weeks, and maybe you guys can check your calendars.
Yes.
What was that date again?
June 22nd.
June 22nd.
Yes, at 2 p.m. And then we've got an annual workshop for city advisory groups to be held on Wednesday, May 19th from 4:30 to 5:30 at the Faulkner Gallery of the Central Library, and that would be for the whole board. So I copied the flyer, the agenda, and I'll just pass it down so you can take a look at it, and that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other announcements or reports or? Seeing none. Next item of business is subcommittee reports.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
a couple of weeks ago I attended the subcommittee for the Lower Mission Creek Flood Control Project, and we talked about different elements within that project. They are proposing to do quite a few of the channel walls with form liner sandstone. So it's basically a form that has the appearance of sandstone, and I cautioned them that the vertical expansion joints should be disguised or integrated into the overlap of the blocks so that you don't see that, and so that doesn't belie the fact that it's a formed wall. I stated a personal preference for concrete channel, just board form concrete if they can't disguise that, but I know we've already sort of been down the path of the form liner, and perhaps I wasn't part of it, but in any case, they're going to work with the form liner people on that. We also talked about the various types of fences that would occur along the channel and the bridges, and I mentioned that the fences really should respond to the context of the setting as opposed to just pick one and have it suit all applications. Sometimes that fence could be a little bit more decorative. Sometimes that fence could be a lot less decorative depending on where it is.
Thank you. Any other subcommittee reports? Seeing none, we're about 3 minutes early for the first item, number 1. Oh, but we're ready for item number 1. And that would be the budget for the fiscal year of 2011.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commission members. I'm Paul Casey, filling in for Betty Weiss today, who is at the Planned Santa Barbara hearing. And so I will be giving the presentation for her. I know she likes to make this an annual visit, but you'll have to settle for me today, and I'll do the best I can. But this is a discussion of our proposed budget that has been submitted to the City Council. It's a difficult budget year, as I think everyone is aware of. It's difficult all around. And the City Council will be considering it through the middle of June. Our department presentation is next Wednesday, I believe, in the morning, in front of the City Council at Council Chambers. With me today, I just want to mention, is Sue Gray, our Administrative Services Manager. She helped greatly in putting the budget together, and she's available for any questions that we might have. Real quickly, just to start off the organizational chart for the department, our department, Community Development, does include arts, the Planning Division, which we will focus on in more detail today, Economic Development, a small program, Housing and Redevelopment Division, which is primarily supported by the Redevelopment Agency, and then the Building and Safety Division, which is general fund supported as well. And so as we talk about the impacts to the department and the general fund struggles, for our department that really impacts the Planning Division and the Building and Safety Division primarily. This slide just kind of shows the overall department budget. It's really skewed by the Redevelopment Agency being such a large component of that and being really a capital funded program. The general fund is about 31% of it all. And just of note, the general plan update doesn't have any additional funding for it for this fiscal year. We're hoping to wrap up the effort and then with existing staff do implementation measures as those priorities are identified by the City Council. The general fund appropriations by major object, as with a lot of city departments, were primarily salaries and benefits. 77% of our department is people in salaries and benefits, and then you have supplies and services, a little bit for equipment. The human services funding is a general fund supported program in which we make grant allocations to human service and social service entities in town. General fund subsidy, that's a key issue for us. And what that's saying, that first line, general fund subsidy, is how much is the general fund supporting the efforts of the Community Development Department? We do have a lot of fees and charges, as you see in the middle, for about half of our cost, but we are reliant upon the general fund. And so when the general fund is hurting, the subsidy provided to us is hit as well. So our fiscal year 2010 adopted budget, that's the current year we're in, we run on fiscal years from June 30 to June 30, is a little bit over $10 million. And the original target reduction number we were given as part of the budget planning was over $1.1 million. So a pretty big hit. What ultimately got included in the recommended budget, though, were reductions totaling just under $600,000, which I'll go over in detail. And then we have an options list, which includes an additional $300,000, which all departments are providing, so that City Council has some flexibility as they make their policy choices about how to go forward. So we've submitted a total of $900,000 of reductions. These adjustments shown here, I'll just go briefly over them in order. We've been able to reduce workstation reductions because we've lost staff. Cumulatively over a couple years, we're down close to 20% of our staffing, and so we're able to get rid of some of those support costs. Suspending the board and commission stipends, that's something that hits home for you all, and we understand, you know, we've gotten mixed messages from board and commission members. Some have said, especially on the non-planning commission board and commissions, you know, you just started receiving them 3 or 4 years ago, and it wasn't really the driving factor of getting on the board and commission, and so in tough times you could understand wanting to go there. Others I know are concerned about that it's a modest dollar amount, and it kind of emphasizes the respect that the city organization has for the time and effort that you do put in as volunteers, and so I know that's a difficult issue. It's why we're very careful to say we're recommending a suspension of the stipends, not an elimination. We'd like to be able to return to them when revenues improve. Raising the planning fees, continued effort to try to decrease the amount of subsidy the general fund has to our planning efforts. Our fees are kind of across the board depending upon the issue areas, but there are a number of the fees that are not at full cost recovery. They're down in the 30 or 40% range, and so just incrementally over time trying to increase the amount of revenue we get from those fees to cover the cost of processing those applications. So some of the fees are being recommended for about a 10% fee increase. An issue you may have read in the paper about the appeal fees. You know, a number of times when we come to boards and commissions and even city council, they say, boy, the appeal fees of $395 is just way too low for the amount of time and effort it takes to process an appeal. You really should ramp those up. So this year we said, okay, we'll call your bluff. Here's one idea about if you wanted to ramp them up, how it could do. And so we presented at the Finance Committee yesterday that maybe you could increase them as high as $3,000, set up kind of a more formal mediation process and some other things. The Finance Committee, not surprising to me, said we're not willing to go with that dramatic of an increase. That we do as a policy want to keep our appeal fees low for access to the process so that people can be heard and get to the city council. And so they said, you know, they're okay with maybe a 10% increase to the $395 rate, but don't want to go more aggressive than that. And we did not assume any revenue from that, so it doesn't impact our budget. It really was just a policy discussion we wanted to have. And we'll have that with the full council as well, but I doubt very much that they will differ from what the Finance Committee's recommendation was. Some one-time measures, Public Works special assignments. They have some projects that our planning staff could do, and so we'll get some revenue from that. It will take planning staff away from their planning effort, but it preserves our staffing as best we can to get through these tough times rather than having to lay people off. The redevelopment agency supporting us finishing up our housing element, so that's very helpful. We received a grant to complete a climate action plan, which is kind of a new requirement that the state of California is kind of requiring cities to do when they're updating their general plan. The Attorney General's office has actually sued a number of communities for not having a climate action plan. So we received a grant to be able to complete that. A housing program and rapid rehousing program. We have a grant for that to deal with homeless issues, and so we have some administration costs that we can charge to that. Same thing with our graphic designer, doing some work for the water and wastewater funds. They've kind of dedicated a certain amount of work, and so we can contract out that cost. And then we get into some staffing levels. We are having to eliminate a project planner out of the Plan Santa Barbara Long Range Planning section. That position is already vacant. We had someone who was able to transfer over to the redevelopment agency. My time is now split half as my assistant city administrator role with community development, but I was able to negotiate some savings for the department for that, and so that's good news for us for meeting our budget reductions. Eliminating a building inspector aide. We have 3 aides who work the building counter, and so proposal is to reduce one of them, and that will impact customer service to the building counter. And when it gets busy, it'll mean that the plan checking staff will come up to the counter and work the counter, but then that takes them away from doing their plan checking. So that will have an impact. We'll feel that. Our planning receptionist got promoted to a job in Public Works, which was great. And we're going to try to live without a planning receptionist. That will mean more automated telephone answering. We're going to try to get more direct lines to the planning staff, so to minimize that. And then working with housing and redevelopment reception staff, have them kind of cover the front counter area as well. Eliminating a planning technician too. We have a retirement coming up in the next month of one of our planning technicians. Jenny Howard is retiring after a long career in service with the city. And so we're proposing not to fill that. It's just one of the strategies when you have vacancies, not filling it. And this one's going to hurt, I think. This is going to hurt our zoning efforts for enforcement staff, for processing zoning information reports, for supporting the front counter, and as part of that, temporarily suspending the sign committee, which we talked to the sign committee about recently, and bringing those sign approvals to the Architectural Board of Review and Historic Landmarks Commission as appropriate. And Jaime Limon has kind of crafted a process to use the consent calendar, volunteer effort of the existing sign committee volunteers to come to those consent calendars so that you have a person with sign expertise contributing as well. It helps us just manage, reduce our workload of just the daily grind of board and commission hearings and agenda prep and staffing and that such. It's not optimum, but we think, you know, we'll make it work for a short period of time, and then hopefully we can reinstate that as well. And then charging half of a building inspector to the water fund, in which he would actually go do some work that the water fund has. It's something we did this fiscal year, worked out okay, so we'll continue it for another year, which gives us some savings, but reduces our effort in building inspection. I think I pretty much talked through these slides already, so I will just kind of skip through them. So other cumulative impacts. You know, part of our difficulty is this is kind of year 3 of a general reduction in staffing, and so it's starting to make a cumulative impact on our ability to be supportive. And some of those issues are ordinance amendments. You know, we're kind of down to a base level of staffing to just kind of support the ongoing grind of the department of our day-to-day needs. And so what falls off are kind of those special assignments, those design guidelines, those ordinance amendments that really do improve the process and make for a better process. But right now, that's kind of the sacrifice we're going to have to go through, and that's the policy decisions that we have to make as we have to reduce our workload staff. And we're concerned is that over time there will be delays in review of development projects. Development activity is down. You notice it on your agendas, not being as full as they were 3 years ago. We're doing okay. Our concern is when the activity turns and picks up, we're immediately going to fall behind. Our staffing level with these adjustments alone will get us back to a level of about 1997 staffing levels. So that's pretty dramatic. You know, that's 15 years ago staffing levels. Supporting a process that's been expanded upon, a single-family design review board that we didn't have before, and additional kind of reviews and requirements. And so there's a rub there that I'm concerned is going to be a problem at some point. So we're just going to have to be careful with that and try to manage our way out of that as activity kind of comes back. We've been working with the Realtor Association to try to streamline our zoning information report process. We're going to make condominiums optional. You know, zoning information reports are a really good tool, both for a seller and a buyer, to kind of understand the conditions of their property, the legality of issues on their property. Condominiums are a different animal. They have homeowners associations. People don't do individual construction, exterior changes as much as condominiums, and so we feel more comfortable that, yeah, maybe we can make those optional, and then owners and buyers can decide if they want to get a report. So we're working on that as well as some other issues. We will need to amend the sign ordinance temporarily to allow for the change in the process. And we're working on kind of some clarification on standards of some kind of just do it type things that we can change the ordinance that we think will just simplify the process of things that aren't controversial, but just will help expedite stuff. And then we're doing an effort to update our environmental review procedures as well. Here's then is a summary of what I've talked about, going from 72 general fund positions down to about 60 in this next fiscal year, reduction of 17% back to staffing levels of 1997. And when you include kind of the special assignments, it gets us down to an even lower staffing level. In building and safety, it's a reduction of over 21% from 28 to 22 staff. And in planning, it's down to 34 staffing. As I mentioned, 10% increase in some of our planning fees to move closer to full cost recovery. We only budgeted a 5% increase in revenues just due to the uncertainty of activity level, not wanting to rely upon revenues from that increase because we're not sure what the activity level will be like 12 months from now. On the appeal fees, this again was what was presented yesterday. Current fee is about $395 per appeal. The average cost, it really varies per appeal, but on average, it could be in the $9,000 to $10,000 range when you factor in the amount of staff time to meet with appellants and the applicants, try to resolve the issues, rewrite the staff report, attend the often lengthy council hearings for staff and the city attorney's time and all that. But as I said, the Finance Committee wanted to keep it low as a policy level, which is fine. It means the general fund picks up that cost, and it's not a problem. No increase recommended in our building and safety fees. We've done a pretty good job of kind of having them at full cost recovery, and we think those are working fine and no need to change them this year. Then on our options list, we've eliminated, no, we have not eliminated. This is options for council to consider that we hope they don't need to go to. It would be an additional project planner, reduce some of the administrative supervisor cost and share that more with housing and redevelopment, eliminate an additional planning technician, and eliminate a records technician. These would be very hard to do, and I'm very hopeful and do not want to get to these kind of cuts because I think they really starts hurting our ability to provide the services that people expect us to. Project planner would probably be reassigned from long-range planning and the Plan Santa Barbara process, but we would also lose expertise in environmental review and CEQA, and it would make progress on any special assignments very unlikely and difficult. The planning administrative supervisor is an internal coordination issue that we would just deal with. An additional planning technician one would impact the development review section and really start to impact our ability to meet permit streamlining act requirements for processing applications and customer counter service. And eliminating a records technician will really lead us to fall behind of a really good effort we've made in the building records section to scan all of our permits and plans and the filing of archived documents and retrieval of street information for customers and such. And again, my hope is that we don't need to go to these kind of levels. Just real quickly, Betty was going to share with you, agenda activity is down approximately 30%. It's not a direct correspondence to staff effort, though, because it's still similar number of agendas that we have to put together. Whether there's 3 items or 7 items, it doesn't impact us as much as the actual agendas getting out and the minutes being typed up and such. Year-end adoption of Plan Santa Barbara is really kind of an overarching goal for our department, I think for the City Council as well. We need to wrap this process up and be moving forward, and so that will be a major focus. So that summarizes the issue. Betty didn't share kind of the overall city picture, so maybe I'll just really briefly kind of share where we're at and what the situation is. In general, the general fund has about a $100 million budget, just for rounding's sake. That's a decent number. We need to eliminate about $9 million of that $100 million budget, so about a 9% reduction. We've submitted a budget proposal to council that includes a number of options, including departmental reductions and some other one-time efforts that gets us to about $6 million plus or minus. And so that remains a gap of about $2.4 million. I know the gap remaining is $2.4 million. And that's where the options list comes into play, or concessions from labor groups. And so we are in active negotiations with all of the labor organizations and hope to get some staff concessions and salary and benefit concessions from that, which would then fill that gap of $2.4 million and possibly allow the council to maybe restore some of the cuts that they are looking at citywide that are currently proposed. And so that's going to play out, though, through mid-June. They need to adopt the budget by mid-June. By the end of June is their statutory requirement, and so they will do so. And we're on track with that, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
How long do you see this budget malaise occurring? Projections when there may be emergence or recovery of any kind?
That's a very good question. We just had a meeting this morning with all the managers and supervisors, and we were all griping that it seems like we've been in this budget malaise for 2 or 3 years now, and we're tired of it, and we just want it to go away. If you listen to the economic forecast the UCSB just put on and read other economic forecasts, there seems to be a growing consensus that perhaps we're at the bottom and starting to turn the corner, but that the growth out of it's going to be very slow and gradual, that it won't be a more typical V-shaped recession you hear people say, but it's going to be a slower slog kind of out of this, that there's still a number of warning signs. The foreclosure rates are still high. The foreclosed homes still need to come on the real estate market, so real estate's not going to lead us out of the recession, which would impact our department more if you saw development activity pick up. So I think, I think internally people are hoping that maybe we've bottomed out. We haven't quite seen it in our revenues, but governmental revenues tend to lag the economy as a whole. Our sales tax comes in late from the state. Our bed tax has had a better last couple months, year over year, but that's building off just awful last year. And so, yeah, we saw a 7% increase in our bed tax, I think, for March, but that was coming off a drop of 23% from the year before. So, exactly. That's, at least the trend is maybe turning. So, we're hoping that maybe we're turning the trend. One of the issues we have to look for in future years is that our pension costs are going to go up. The loss in the stock market from PERS, which is the entity that runs our pension funds, they usually come back with increases maybe 2 to 3 years after they've seen the loss. And so we're already projecting some hefty increases to our budget to cover those costs in fiscal year 2012. So hopefully we come out of it, but there's going to be some additional issues we're going to have to grapple with as we come out of it.
Tangential, but it refers to the economic crisis. In previous crises, we've seen the formation of some kind of leadership from the council to promote the economic activity, not just the fiscal wealth of the city, but the wealth of the citizens of Santa Barbara, the city as well, with the broader picture. Like the county had the business assistance team, and Santa Barbara had, I forgot what it was. That's in the 91 recession, I remember that. Is there anything like that forming? Because I haven't really heard anything like that. It just seems like the concern is more about the fiscal wealth of the budget of the city, as opposed to bring business to Santa Barbara, which is so sorely lacking at this time.
Yeah, I think, Commissioner Peugeot, I wouldn't say there's anything formal forming like you mentioned, but I'll mention a couple things, because economic development and that kind of issue has been kind of on my personal mind, but also a number of city council members' minds as well. And what we've learned from talking to the Chamber of Commerce, downtown organization, business leaders, commercial brokers, large employers in town, is that, there are certainly global forces at work in this downturn. It's not something that the city of Santa Barbara did or can do to kind of offset just the complete credit meltdown and real estate meltdown, which is global in nature. And that what the city needs to do from an economic development standpoint is to continue to provide and foster an environment where the small startup companies can come in and grow. That it's not our best advantage to go after the Fortune 500 companies. You can't compete with the Floridas, who offer tens of $millions of financial incentives to lure people away. I'm thinking of Tenet Healthcare that moved away here. And then our bread and butter in many ways is UCSB, and the economic spinoff that occurs from UCSB and makes that engine run. So I think from our standpoint, we need to, as boards and commissions and as planning staff, have a process that's fair and understandable so that people, when they have expansion opportunities and development opportunities, aren't so scared of the process that they don't even consider expanding and working in town. And so I think that's always incumbent upon all of us to have that customer service focus. And I don't mean to say we got to shortchange the process. I think we just have to have a good and fair process. And that's what I try to stress to applicants when they come in is we're not going to be the speediest. We're not necessarily going to be the easiest, but, work with us and we'll get a good product out the other end.
Yes.
In 91, I remember we had the excellence in customer service process. And it was very painful. I mean, I hate it. I think everybody hates it. What do I have to do? But in retrospect, I think it was very positive. It made everybody evaluate things from both sides. Where are we not being fair? Are we not being expeditious? I personally think that the city needs this big time. It means to run more efficient, to run more fairly, to see things from the other perspective. That's my own 2 cents.
And I would agree with you. I think that's something that staff needs to be sensitive to and the boards and commissions need to be sensitive to as well.
Are there any other questions, comments? Thank you very much, Mr. Casey.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Our next item will be the Archeology report for 34 West Victoria Street.
Madam Chair, Dr. Glassow reviewed the report and appendix and concluded that the archaeological investigation supports the report's conclusions and recommendations that because the proposed project would not have the potential to result in significant impacts on prehistoric or historic archaeological resources, no mitigation measures are required, but that the standard condition regarding discovery of unanticipated archaeological resources shall be on the plans prior to issuance of building permit.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
We had 2 seconds. Mr. Adams, and why don't we take Mr. Adams?
Yes.
You were quick on the. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries. We're about 10 minutes early for the Historic Structures Report for 34 West Victoria, but perhaps we can start that.
Good afternoon, members of the HLC. The Historic Structures Report that you had previously reviewed and accepted back in... Oh, sorry. I'm trying to find the date here, and I didn't print it. But you had previously reviewed and accepted the Historic Structures Report. When it came to the environmental staff utilizing some of the analysis in that report, it was brought to our attention that the report contained a significance determination for the Arlington Village project, which was, it's adjacent to this and had been used as part of the cumulative analysis. And really, it's kind of a technical point, but when you do a cumulative analysis, you're looking at your primary project and then looking at, well, how does this particular project affect, in this case, views of the Arlington Theater? And they did the analysis for the project correctly, but then in looking at the projects surrounding that were in our review, they actually looked at that project maybe a little bit more in depth, almost like a mini project review within this report, determining that preliminarily they thought that it could have a significant impact. Well, it doesn't contain all the pieces of a historic structures report that we would want to see, and that determination is more appropriate to be in its own historic structures report. What we want to know is how the Arlington Village project may also contribute to, degradation of the views of the Arlington Tower. That was the piece that we were looking for. And so the consultant has adjusted the report to just focus on that particular issue. It didn't change the determinations for the 34 West Victoria project in any way. It was really just a cleanup, and that's why the report was revised and is being brought back before you. So I can answer any questions. It's really, we're getting into the fine points of CEQA and everything, but
it's relevant.
Yeah, I have a question. Because that's the part that I was very much uneasy in the report. Let's see.
In the original report?
No, in this report, because there is a mention of the Arlington Village and saying that the sight lines are basically okay, and I just do not see how that statement can be founded
in this report.
Yeah, in this report, because sight lines. I mean, I think on the projects, it's been demonstrated. The last reviews of that project, the sight lines has been demonstrated and all that. But for the Arlington Village, I do not feel that I have adequately seen those sight lines as agreeing with CEQA, or so I was just assuming that part should be completely removed from this report. But other than, well, let's see, there's I'll find it. Hold on a
I have a marked up version, so my page numbers are not going to be the same. Okay.
Yeah.
Starting to talk about the
Yeah,
cumulative analysis. Well, one thing to keep in mind
Yeah.
is that when
Actually,
they write
50.
the report, it's really a slice in time, and they're looking at a particular set of plans that are, it's not an approval, they're under consideration, so things are going to change. What I would prefer you to focus on is that when this historic structures report was written, it analyzed whether or not the project 34 West Victoria was going to cause an adverse impact to this particular item, which was the views of the Arlington Theater, because that is a historic resource. And it determined that for various reasons that would be a less than significant impact. But you can't stop there. Then you have to look at, well, this is going to cause some level of impact, and would that level of impact, would we say that when you consider that it's, maybe changing a little bit from this project, and then you look at what else is happening in the surrounding area, it's changing a little bit more, are you eventually inching towards being a significant impact? I don't believe that that's the case. I think they lay out some good logic why we're not going to cross that line with the 34 West Victoria project, as well as with these other projects. We don't know what's going to happen in the future with Arlington Village. But what I don't want to have happen is this particular report set a bias right now that says that project as designed at one time when they looked at it for a cumulative analysis here, that was going to cause a significant impact. That assessment needs to be done at the time that project comes in. When it comes in, it's going to consider out it's affecting the views of the Arlington Tower, and then it will look at what actually happens at 34 West Victoria Street.
Yeah, I think that's why I was having trouble with that, because if, for this instance, a report talks about already built buildings there, like the 110, the Cook Building, the new we've just approved that building that will replace the Magellan. It's so I mean those are. You're looking at those and you said, okay, I can see what they're saying, but the Arlington, the Arlington Village project, there hasn't been a sort of a conceptual approval of that, so it's hard to make these projections. I mean,
correct.
There's the arch and so forth, so that's why I thought maybe it would be better if we can just state in here that that building is yet to be built. When that project comes, it will have its own, CEQA reviews.
That's exactly what's going to happen.
I was wondering if that could just be stated and then you're done with.
Well, that
for this project.
That is what will happen. We don't have a choice that when Arlington Village comes forward, it has to have its own level of review.
Yeah.
I don't believe that it needs to be restated here. That just is a requirement. We cannot avoid doing that under our own guidelines, as well as what CEQA tells us that we have to do. So,
I think, Farmina, you're just asking for an acknowledgement within this report. So
Yeah,
there is a forerunner to your obvious action.
we can direct you can accept it today with direction that it be revised.
Is it revised or just removed? To me, it's not a.
Well, we do want to have some discussion of the Arlington Village site because it does add to the cumulative. It contributes to the cumulative setting and the impact analysis. So we want to acknowledge that there is something that is underway on that site. I just don't want it to be too specific, and I'm hearing that you almost want it to be completely taken out of here.
Well, because it talks about sight lines, and there's no plans here. There is nothing in here about that project that I can say, okay, yes, I can agree with this statement that the sight lines are not a problem. There's an arch, there's this, there's sight lines are not a problem, because I don't have that in front of me. I don't, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so to me, that is a sentence that kind of undermines this report, which is really looking at the overall thing. So I was just saying, for that project, we're just going to leave it until it has its own reviews. I mean, if they can make it just a separate opinion of their own, that is not going to, that's a whole different thing. But to put it in the CICWA kind of analysis, I just had I had misgivings about that. I'll find that section.
I think the problem is the first paragraph on page 49 under analysis, right? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you remove the last sentence, the project has been designed. You know, that seems to be the most.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
If you remove that sentence, would you be okay with that?
Yeah, I would be. It says the project has been, see, this under analysis, and that,
Okay,
yeah.
so the question is, would staff be comfortable with the removal of that sentence, and would the preparer of the report be
It's
comfortable with it?
this right here.
The sentence is this.
The project, yeah,
The project has been designed to preserve sightlines from the Arlington Hotel
I was
Archway.
just trying to facilitate this.
yeah, me too. Yeah, I do. But that creates a problem.
I agree with you. I was going to say I thought that was what Fermina's problem was, that to me that means that's not adequate.
That whole paragraph, because it says the Arlington Village project at 1330 State is currently proposed, would primarily consist blah blah blah. A village green would be, and it talks all about that below grade, and then it says, and it talks about the architect. And it draws in, and then it says the project has been designed to preserve sight lines from the Arlington Hotel archway at the corner of and towards the tower and all that. That's the part that I'm having a hard time with.
The last sentence.
Yeah, the last sentence.
I don't have any problem with them.
I strongly
Striking that.
also object to that statement.
Yeah.
Are there any other comments or requests or revisions to this report? Or questions? No? Okay. I'm sorry, I should have asked for public comment before any questions, and I will ask for it now.
Thank you. Killam to Forest. One point that, and it was especially made with the other project that will have to be reviewed later if it ever comes back to you, is that you wanted to preserve one of the importance of the Arlington Arlington structure is its monumentality, and that in this report is not addressed. That I thought it certainly, this structure on its, or the height of this structure that's proposed, the quote-unquote Arlington Village that's proposed on its south facade impinges on the monumentality, or at least in my opinion, impinges on the monumentality of that iconic structure, and that should be reflected in the Historic Structures Report. Thank you.
Ms. Angeloro, if you wish.
I haven't studied the Arlington Theater, but I'm not sure that the monumentality of it is the character-defining feature. It's one of them. So it's possible that this project, 34 West Victoria, is causing some type of an effect on the monumentality. I'm not sure. You've reviewed the report previously and accepted it in its completeness. So
That is correct.
Well, I think that's where we get confusion of even bringing in the Arlington Village project. It's an entirely different project.
Right. Yes.
The purpose of this revision was to address that cumulative impact. And now we're talking about opening up the report and seeing some other aspect of whether it's been addressed or not. And it seems to be beyond the scope of what we're talking about today.
Yes.
If the commission is fine, I would move to approve the report with the deletion of the of that line after the last line in the paragraph on page 49 and under analysis that we talked about.
Do I have a
Last line
second?
of the first paragraph.
Do I have a second? Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries. Thank you. The next item will be 35 State Street,
Oh, goody.
preliminary review. Yes. Yes, I think you have to.
Oh, it's just this last sentence here.
Oh,
Is that just a color version, Mark?
Yeah,
Or is it
it's
different?
my version. There's a bunch of other.
It's the same.
There's the same.
It's the same?
Yeah, there's the same.
Just that's pretty.
shut that down. I think we have a planner here who wants to give us an introduction to this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to just give you a brief history and then talk about the process for this project. This project was originally approved in 2001 by the City Council. HLC approvals were granted for each area of the project site. However, those have expired at this point. The applicant submitted a substantial conformance determination request last July, and that was recently approved by the city administrator. Part of that approval included conditions of approval, and those were distributed to you, I believe, for review. Staff considers the changes that were made on Area C to be relatively big changes, but we do think that they're good changes. The changes on Area B are more minor in nature, and then on Area A, there are relatively few changes overall. The project is back before you in order for the Commission to give additional feedback to the HLC subcommittee that was formed to review this project. So that's really the purpose, is to give clear direction for that subcommittee so that they can move forward in their reviews. The applicant has made some changes to the plan since the last time that you reviewed them, and so they'll go through those changes. One of the conditions of approval that's important has to do with timing, and it does require that this project get preliminary approvals by September 30th, which means that time is of the essence in terms of the review. Not that we want to rush your review, but there is this deadline that the applicant is working with at the request of the city administrator. And I can answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for planner?
Today we are presented to the proposal to approve, give preliminary approval to Area A, right, and review the other two. Is that okay? Thanks.
Thank you. I'm wondering if I should read the comments from our concept review to familiarize the commissioners again. I will do that. Continued indefinitely to the city administrator, who we understand has given substantial conformity, with the following comments. The mass bulk and scale of Area A remains untouched. The mass bulk and scale of Area B is physically comparable to the entitled project. The mass bulk and scale of Area C has been vastly reduced and more in keeping with the historic district. Review the curbside parking on Mason Street and the need to accommodate hotel guests. Architecturally, the Commissioner supports the new direction, but asks that the elements be simplified and be less dramatic wherever possible, including the scaling down of the elevator towers. Break up the public commercial spaces in A and F in Area C to make the scale of the project more compatible with the rest of State Street. Pay attention to the Area B elevation on Helena Avenue regarding the driveways, that is, enhance the pedestrian experience along Helena Avenue, considering there are a lot of driveways there. The landscape choices should integrate well with the State Street view shed and corridor, and the landscaping looks substantial, which is supportable. The action was 4 and for approval, 4 in opposition. So this is a fairly controversial item. Will you introduce yourselves to the record? And
yes, thank you. My name is Melissa Sinarli from Design Arc. I am the project manager for the Entrada, and I've been before you already twice in the past 8 to 9 months. Obviously, Mark Shields.
I'm Mark Shields, designer with Design Arc, one of many architects working on this project representing the design.
Robert Farrell with Korean Partners. We're consultants to ownership. Party partners.
if you hit the middle button.
So the light means something.
Yes.
Well, we wanted to do, again, a brief introduction. Now that the SCD has been approved, obviously we want to move forward with the design review as intended in the SCD conditions of approval. As a reminder to everybody, the site's Area A is the old California Hotel, Area B across the street where currently Hotspots is, and Area C with the redesign that we've proposed. Today we'd like to seek preliminary approval on Area A. As staff mentioned, there are very, very minor changes there. We've basically kept the exact same massing and just changed the interior uses to accommodate the hotel and hotel amenities. Area A has 51 total units and 2 commercial spaces fronting State Street. Area B has 48 units, all hotel, and has also 2 commercial spaces out front. I'd like to point out that areas A and B solely take care of the private parking requirement for all the hotel units that are on A, B, and C. And then finally moving on to Area C, which has 24 units and extensive commercial on the first floor, a few amenities for the hotel component, the gym and the spa, and obviously the public plaza, which is a new component with public benefits. And lastly, the visitor information center on the corner. I'll go ahead and move on to Mark so he can walk you through Area A.
And if you don't mind, can I just interrupt? This was just handed to us. It's fairly thick. I have no idea what it really says, but if someone can summarize what the substantial conformance determination, if it in any way affects what we should be looking at.
Madam Chair, it really doesn't, but it does give you that deadline, and it also does say that Area B should not encroach any farther into those setbacks than the version that you reviewed in October.
I see.
So
That
just
is
sets
the
parameter.
extent of all right.
Yes.
So everybody's
If it would be of any help, I was fairly involved with the discussions that led to the final document, and I think that the vast majority of the discussions and the essence of it go to the timing of the approvals.
Yes,
when
that's what it looks
when
like.
public approvals, public improvements have to be done, when construction of the various areas have to start, and I think, as my recollection is, very little of it dealt with architectural issues. It was more construction scheduling, public improvement.
I agree, but I did see some things that seemed to be architecturally related, and I wanted to be informed of them before we were given a presentation. So, thank you. Sorry, Mark.
That's all right. Today, we'd like to go through all 3 of the buildings before we receive comments, so I think you have to just bear with me while I try and be efficient about going through each one. first of all, it's the Californian Hotel, which you guys have seen before, and really no radical new exterior changes at all. Pretty much this had preliminary approval before. There's the Mason Street elevation, which we worked carefully with Alex Cole on, the historical significance of how the windows modulated across the facade, the new parking entrance, which was different than what used to be, but she was ultimately okay with that. And so this represents where we were last time. The State Street elevation shows the new hotel, or actually refurbished new hotel facade, which I'll remind you, we were going to be propping up carefully with the help of Taylor Siphon. So this facade will remain intact, including, I think it was 14 feet around the corner of Mason Street, while the rest of the building is completely refurbished. This will be saved. So we're going to be propping it up during construction, which is quite a task, but I think HLC last time or a year ago agreed that that was the only way to go about this. This element here represents the addition, which is now in the vacant lot of between the existing hotel and the Harbor View Inn just down State Street. It is actually part of the hotel, so these are hotel rooms. The HLC felt at one point in time that it should be different rather than trying to match the Californian Hotel, so that's what we've endeavored to do here. Design a completely different looking building, different than Harbor View Inn, so it kind of punctuates the architecture along State Street. We've worked with the HLC extensively to provide this niche between the two buildings and have revised the elevation based on comments about a year ago. The other two facades are the south elevation, which basically won't be seen because the Harbor View Inn is completely in the way of it, and you can see the outline of the Harbor View Inn, which is adjacent to our south elevation. But at any rate, we have set it back. I think it's 5 feet from the property line, and we do have plans to have plants in that space, as well as more studio-style windows to capture more of the reflected light off of the Harbor View Inn, which is next door. Beyond, you can see the outline of the existing Californian Hotel, which is at its existing height. The new addition will be designed to the current Coastal Commission standard heights. The back of the hotel, which faces Mission Creek, is fairly simple. There's a lot of new landscaping between the riparian corridor that we've developed and begun to show here in elevation. This side of the hotel has really great views when you're up there of the harbor, which is kind of neat. Once you're a visitor, you can go upstairs. There's a pool on the upper deck where the hotel users can go and enjoy the view of the harbor and the yacht club and that sort of thing. Architecturally, again, the California Hotel was under a lot of scrutiny historically, so we've pretty much tried to match all the historical details. We have matched all the historical detailing, and you'll see more of that as we proceed through the preliminary, well, not preliminary, but also the construction documents phase. The new addition is very Mediterranean, Santa Barbara style, with trellises, recessed windows, thickened walls, French doors where we have patios, careful landscaping around the base where we're disguising the parking, but again, that's in the back of the building. So we're seeking preliminary approval on this project so we can move ahead with the working drawings. Moving forward to Area B, which is just across the street on State Street. This project was previously approved in mass. Now it's a different looking building architecturally, but relatively the same size. We've just reconfigured it for our tastes and style. So there's a historic element which is along State Street that wraps down Mason Street, so we're preserving that. There's the enhanced Paseo view corridor from State Street to the mountains, which was discussed quite extensively at the PC, I believe. We've actually widened this view Paseo a bit from the previously approved drawing, so there will be a better view of the mountains than there was from the previously approved project. The other portion of the building, which goes down towards Stearns Wharf, is Mediterranean, again, of course, in style, with big arches characteristic of much of the State Street facades, with open, probably steel windows to a storefront beyond, an arcade that you can walk under, both in this project and also adjacent on the other side of the Paseo along State Street. So we're really continuing the idea, as you see all the way around here in this room, of the State Street elevation feeling, marching up State Street. This is really the beginning of all that, and once you cross the underneath the freeway, of course, State Street continues. So our idea is to match in feeling what's going on with the rest of State Street. Moving around the corner to the Mason Street elevation, this is the elevation we showed last time, which there was some concern about in terms of the verticality of it and also the continuation of this facade all being in one plane, which we will show you in a second how we've kind of reconfigured that and taken a look at that. Around the corner on Helena Street, if you go down Mason and then turn right on Helena, you'll see that the building becomes a little bit more residential in feel. So I believe, I'm kind of backwards here, but this is the corner. This is set back more than the rest of the project, with stone walls and landscaping around the corner. A couple residential units kind of broken up by the depth off the property line. A relatively loose skyline. We had this proposed trellis like pergola on top, which we felt now is maybe a bit heavy, so we've kind of taken a look at that, and I'll show you what we've done to that in a moment. These are the two parking entrances. This one, in between these two buildings, which above it is the Paseo that goes to State Street, is where you go down to the parking for the hotel. And on the left, further down Mason, is the parking entrance, which goes up to upper parking level. So the parking level is actually split. Moving along to the south elevation, which is against the parking lot now. I guess it's, I forget what the name of the store is there. Mountaineer Sports is against this side. We've actually pushed the building back about 5 feet for the majority of the massing for the upper 2 stories. This portion here is back about 3 feet, and the idea was to put stone walls down here to kind of give it a feeling of base, really landscape that. Who knows if there will ever be a building there, but our idea is to make this attractive when there isn't a building there. If there is a building there, well, this whole lower story wouldn't be a good place to have units, so we felt that was an ideal spot for the parking, which everybody seemed to like last time. Again, going up to the second and third floor, there's more modulation, more breaking up of the masses, and there's a public plaza, not public, but a plaza for the hotel users up here, which actually looks over Lower State Street and down to the harbor. Very Mediterranean again, a lot of typical Spanish detailing you see up and down State Street. Recessed, probably clad windows, wood trellis on the upper deck, wrought iron balconies, arches with metal window storefronts beyond, Mediterranean landscaping. Some of the smaller details that you see around town that I think are particularly attractive, the small venting windows and that sort of thing, tapered chimneys, all of the elements that we feel make up or begin to make up a successful commercial design in Santa Barbara. I want to also point out that there was a comment about the Mason Street Pedestrian walkway, which is or actually Helena Street, where you're walking along Helena Street, and then from the ocean you turn left to go down Mason. And one of the comments you had was to look at some of that, the public walkway there, and we took a look at that, and one of the small things we've done is kind of do the more enhanced paving across the 2 entrances to the driveways, just to give people a sense of direction, and we've also enhanced some of the landscaping around these spaces as well, just to make that pedestrian feeling a little bit more attractive. Now, going back to the Mason Street elevation, which people were concerned about in terms of massing, again, this was the previous submittal where this plane was relatively flush. We've taken a look at that and come up with some ideas to alleviate some of that massing. This is the new elevation, which begins to play with some of the architectural features on this facade. Primarily, we looked at the arcade in front of the main hotel lobby entrance.
Do you mind if we kind of see these together, or at least I can see them?
If we can.
Is it this one?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Looking at the main hotel lobby entrance, we used to have a series of 4 arched openings, and the general opinion was that maybe we needed to announce the hotel entrance a bit more. So we went to 3 varied arched openings with a parapet design and possibly the name of the hotel above the entrance, which makes the hotel part of it a little bit more prominent, a little more commercial. This element still goes out as an arcade over the sidewalk to provide protection for people being dropped off for the valet queuing area.
Thank you. That would be great. If we can sort of
put it right here.
Perhaps one on top of the other so we have some idea of your changes. Thank you.
So this was the prior submittal with the 4 arches, and this is the new idea. We've also loosened up and broken away some of the massing up here, thinking that if we could lighten up the upper story, the building would feel more broken up and more village-like. So we've taken the roof off this exterior deck and actually pushed these 2 decks back, so we have openings up here to an exterior arcade deck with 3 openings instead of 2, shorten the size of the roof area so there's less roof massing, less looming 3-story vertical architecture. We've taken a look at this area, and we were able to actually push back the 2nd story here, working with the client, deciding that we could actually lose a couple of feet of the hotel rooms. We were able to push this level back about 2 feet. So we've created another line which has a small cornice and then blends up into the historic portion of the building here. So this is now pushed back compared to where all this was in one plane. Another small change is we thought about how it might be a nice detail to continue these columns down to the sidewalk, even though we're over parking here, with some kind of a nice Mediterranean tile detail below the wrought iron railings for the balconies that are there. We also studied the corner element, thinking that if we could somehow keep the corner looking a little bit lower by eliminating these plaster columns up on the roof deck completely and going to a wood trellis, which is actually back inside of this deck, that it would help, again, lower the scale as the building reaches the corner. So, and also I think making this more residential in feel helps the hotel facade announce itself a bit more, because it really is a hotel. It's not a residential project, and we need to, for people to understand that and to see it, and just to say entrance. So these are some of the changes we've made here. Hopefully you'll appreciate those. You can see in plan above actually how we've kind of made these moves too. This indicates this 2-foot return that we've made. This indicates studying how the upper decks are now pulled back to alleviate some of the vertical massing in terms of the 3rd story here and here. Moving on to C. Oh yeah, almost forgot. How could I forget? Spent a lot of time doing a few SketchUp models too to make it even clearer. Let's see if I can get that. There we go. Okay, this is the project as you saw it last time, the first really perspective view anybody's seen of it, which looks from the corner of State and Mason southeast towards the new proposed Mason Street elevation of the hotel entrance, residential or units beyond, and some of the architecture we talked about before. And this SketchUp model shows what it looked like last time before we made some of these changes. Primarily, it's the one plane here, it's the 4 arches, no announced parapet over the hotel lobby, the plaster columns above on the deck beyond. This drawing, which I'm not sure we can compare them on the same screen now, shows the change. So here we have the 3 arches over the hotel lobby, the pronounced parapet design. Beyond, we've lost the columns. We're going to more of a lighter wood trellis. We've opened up these 3 arched openings to open decks on the 3rd floor. We've managed to push this facade back 2 feet, so this is now proud with a cornice detail that blends up into the historic portion of the building here. Tapered chimneys, nice eave detailing, deeply recessed windows, probably metal-clad openings, introducing this new tile element below on the exterior decks, which are just about parking there. And you can kind of get a feeling for the project from the corner. This is the arched openings on the corner of Area C. In addition to that, we've also modeled the view, which we thought was important, the view down Mason Street, kind of standing in the middle of State Street, looking down the street to give you a feeling, we've added the landscape, as to what these buildings feel like. Again, landscaping's in the way, but there will be landscaping. And you can also see the relationship of these 2 facades to each other, the Paseo connection beyond, there's a person walking across the street here, and the Beacons building in the distance. We didn't have time, or we don't have all the information to model everything beyond, but we felt that it had a nice feeling to it. It felt comfortable, and I might point out that this element on Area C is set back probably 50 feet from the actual edge of State Street. So that's to relieve this corner so we can grab pedestrians and focus them on the new courtyard that we've developed on Area C. So that gives you a feel for it. All the details haven't been completely worked out yet, but that's the general feeling of the project as it is today.
Mark, maybe this would be a good time to talk about some of the concerns the committee had regarding the valet.
Want to run through that, Melissa?
Sure. We heard what you mentioned last time about, if this is a true hotel, can you make sure that there's enough adequate queuing area and staging area for the valet pickup and drop-off. Originally, we had 1 stall on either side of Mason, 1 for pickup, 1 for drop-off. And we went back and talked to our transportation engineer, and he recommended that we add another space for the drop-off area and also create additional staging area inside of Area B, where I labeled 4 additional spaces for valet purposes. So in effect, if there was some queuing, if there were already 2 cars out front of the lobby on public street, someone would direct them to go inside Area B's 1st floor, where there would be an easy connection to the lobby for check-in. Just as a rule of thumb, we've allocated about 1/3, 2/3 ratio of 1/3 of self-park available, and about 2/3 of trips available for valet. We don't want to do 100% valet. What we've been told by a transportation engineer is if you do 100% valet, a lot of people who don't care to valet will spill off into the neighborhood instead, which we'd like to avoid. In doing so, the 1/3, 2/3 is spread out. Area A is fully self-park. There are no tandem parking spaces there, so it's easy to self-park. And then the 1st floor of Area B is also all self-park. The remaining of the valet parking is provided all in Area B. So all 3 buildings, hotel component, primarily all of the valet is in Area B. I do have some more details related to the number of trips that could be expected based on the traffic report, but just to simplify and summarize, the 1/3, 2/3 ratio seemed to work. And so in total, we have 7 spaces, 3 on Mason Street, 4 inside the building to alleviate any potential queuing issue that may occur.
Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. To continue our discussion on Area C, I just wanted to go back to the site plan for a moment to remind everybody where we were. Originally, it was, way back when it was all one building over parking, which is on the first floor. Now we have all underground parking. We've basically lost about 25,000 square feet, I believe, to create this public paseo, which landscape architect will be speaking about as soon as we're finished with our presentation. Overall, the idea was that we could provide this public paseo, which opens up views to the mountains by keeping this element of the building low. We like the idea of establishing a public covered arcade that goes through the building and comes over and connects up to the lobby of the hotel. So there is a connection between these two projects, figuring that you could start out your journey here, walk across Mason Street in an enhanced crossing area, go through Area C, walk by the park on the way to State Street, and continue your walk up State Street. So there's a relationship between these two projects in terms of the site planning. Again, as I mentioned before, the more forward building that's on Area C is actually set back 50 feet from the edge of State Street with enhanced paving design, a nice landscaping kind of signifying entry to this open plaza. Architecturally, oops, that's A. Through the plan. Architecturally, if you look at State Street, we're looking towards the mountains on State Street, which you can still see, and we have the Visitors Center, which is on the more northerly portion of the site. Stairs leading down to parking, and then the beginning of the arcade, which wraps around the back of the open courtyard and continues on to the entrance of the hotel lobby in Project B on Mason Street. The project begins to build up on the corner, which again is set back 50 feet from State, with a series of low arcades which shade the storefront areas. We actually have a spa around the side on Mason Street. And then it gradually builds back into becoming hotel units and a few units for sale. As the building wraps around, in the background is beacons, which is in a way a backdrop for our three-story elements. It's still broken up, it wraps around the back of the courtyard, is set back again from the arcade facade, and we have a series of trellises. The pool area actually faces due south. There are pool cabanas behind the pool, which has south-facing roofs that we intend to put solar panels on as well. So, again, very Santa Barbaran, reiterating a lot of the arcades that people have done on State Street, and we think that's a nice feeling. The Mason Street elevation, which is exactly opposite the Mason Street elevation we just went through in the hotel lobby entrance on B. Again, this is the State Street sidewalk area here, building being set back 50 feet. Then we start to build up with our project. And it's a series of hotel units with decks that actually face the ocean. So these are nice spaces that need to have covering and shade that face the Pacific. On the street, we have a series of planters, buildings broken up in terms of in and outs. I think we're out 3 feet here, we're back 5 feet there, and we're back maybe 10 feet here. Some low stone walls and a lot of landscaping at the pedestrian level. Wrapping around the corner, and this is going down Helena Street towards the railroad tracks, which really isn't as public. We don't really see people walking that way or finishing a walk that way. We come around the corner, and this is Mason going back to State. We have a couple of commercial loading docks to supply supplies for the restaurant spaces we've designed. Very simple facade. Some areas allowed for landscaping. The building again steps back from the street on the 3-story portion. There's a nice covered north-facing outdoor area for the restaurant above, which would look at the mountains. and then the parking entrance for parking below. Very simple architecture above. We're not trying to do anything fancy. And then as you wrap around and go, the building goes parallel to the railroad tracks. And we've had some discussion before about this facade. And I think the last time we talked about it, the board was split on which direction to go. But we've taken the stance of kind of keeping it simple, having some clear story windows similar to some of the basic industrial buildings you see along the tracks now. So we're not trying to make that village feeling. We're trying to go with the feeling that follows the railroad tracks throughout Santa Barbara and in the funk zone. And that would be this facade. And I think that ends my portion of the presentation. If the landscape architects would like to. Anything else, Melissa?
I think we're running a little out of time.
Okay.
I know we can address any questions regarding the landscaping. Did you want to show some of the modeling that we have for Area C at the back end?
We could. Do you have those plans? Wait, they're in here.
Grab them all the way at the back.
That's right.
They're pretty much the same
These are
renderings
the drawings,
we had.
yeah, you've seen before, but maybe it would help to see them once again.
Just as a reminder.
This was an aerial view, of course, which you'll never see, but gives you the idea of the way we've configured the architecture around the Paseo, the corner of State and Mason, the pool area to the north, the solar collectors on the pool cabanas above, possible restaurant here and back against the Beacons building, the landscaping along Mason Street, where's the pedestrian walkway to the hotel entrance on B. A couple of views from eye level. This one looking straight into the Courtyard from State. This is the building that we have set back 50 feet from the corner. Again, another view of the Courtyard space. And I think that's it.
Thank you.
Again, just as a conclusion, we are seeking preliminary approval on A and then continue our discussions for conceptual review on areas B and C at a mass, size, bulk, and scale related issues before we are directed to move to subcommittee level where we would dive into the details of those two buildings. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Does the commission wish to discuss the architecture and then hear landscapes, or would they like to hear landscape in tandem? Any preferences?
I think we should discuss the architecture and
All right.
architects are here.
Why don't we do that then?
That's good.
Okay. I'm going to ask if there's any public comment. I see that there is.
Thank you. Willem DeForest. Some questions. There is a tower on Area C. I don't quite know where it is. It's sort of sticking up towards the back. What is it for, and what is its height? Is a question I have. Secondly, the pergola on Area B sort of now seems very much by itself and looks, at least in the drawings, renderings, that it's plunked down on the top of that building like a couple on a wedding cake. The third question I have is, and I guess are we going to do the landscaping separately?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And Mr. Forbes,
I'll comment on that later.
Yes, I'll just
and
remind
maybe
you.
my question will be answered.
Yes,
Thank you.
that these are public comments and not necessarily questions. I'll just remind you. So, I believe the tower has been pointed out several times.
Mm-hmm. What is it?
Pardon?
Go ahead.
So I would like to have questions from the commission, please. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I'll just
Mr.
start out.
Adams?
In Area B, you said you widened that central corridor. Generally, how much was that widened? Maybe I missed that point that
The
you made
central
from before.
Paseo, as it goes through from State towards the mountains.
Toward
I think
Helena.
it varies, but at least 3 feet at the minimum.
Okay.
So at some points it's more than that.
Mhm.
So it's a bit better. It's not a lot wider. but
Right.
Yeah, I don't
a bit
know if
wider.
you recall the previous design had a building at the back of it that kind of was angled that actually limited the view corridor through the Paseo, whereas we actually let that open and in addition to that pulled the building facades a little bit outward to relieve that facade.
For a total of about 3 feet.
3 to 4 feet,
3 to
it
4.
depends on which level and the balconies and decks and so forth.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I do have one.
Sharp.
You mentioned several times 50 feet from State Street to, I believe, the tower, the entrance
Tower
here.
element of that building.
How much is it from the existing curb line?
Good question. Yeah, that's a good question. Who would be able to measure that?
Before the narrowing of
Yes.
State Street and the widening of the sidewalks.
Correct.
Can measure it.
The drawings don't
know.
show
The
the
old line.
existing
It doesn't
curb.
show the old curb line. Well, we can definitely look into that number specifically.
Okay.
I think it's at least 10 feet, though. It's hard to
Again,
know
I don't see the
exactly since
existing
look at
curb
the old
here.
plans.
It's,
We could dig it up.
okay.
I think
I
there's
just, I think the 50 feet from State Street was a little misleading.
Okay,
Because
the new
peak-
versus the old.
People do picture the existing, not
The narrowing.
the narrowing of State Street.
It's the widening of the sidewalk, not the narrowing.
Depending on
Oh,
depending on how you describe it.
okay.
Yeah, we can definitely
We'll
look
clarify
into
that.
that and clarify it. Yeah, I don't believe we have the.
Exact
I had a couple
information.
questions.
Thank you.
One, have you done anything about creating a bus stop?
Do we have bus stops?
Bus stop is being relocated away from this where it currently is.
Okay.
But I think it's already been handled in the older
Transportation.
off-sites permitted plans, and I think that's being dealt
Because
with
of,
already.
You know, the shuttle stop and so forth.
It's important.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And also, where was it I was thinking? Oh, where you have a roof deck, I'm trying to remember which one it was. I was just concerned that we'll have another, sorry, that we'll have another Canary Hotel with all the umbrellas, trellises, towers, and so forth. We've got a whole little town up there, and I hope that won't happen here. But you will need some sort of shade.
We will, and we have 2 roof decks on B
Okay.
for that hotel. One is off in the northern corner facing the mountains, and then one is set back a bit. We can go to the roof plans to show you where they are exactly.
Well, I was just, that's not important. I was just bringing up the fact that,
Okay.
you know, that I hope you're
Try
not
to
going
not have a village up there, you mean?
Right, yes.
Small
Yes.
town.
Are you planning to put a
Small town in
village
the
in?
west.
Oh, thank you.
Do we have
And
any?
the
Oh,
other,
sorry.
well, the other question of that, I was concerned a little bit about the solar panels and how those are going to work.
Look or work.
Oh, I
They'll
know
work,
they're going to
yeah.
work.
They'll work.
But that wasn't the question.
Right. Do we have any further questions from the commission? Seeing none, would you like to give comments or wait for the landscape? I do think a project is integrated with landscape, but
I
comment?
prefer to see the
Yes, I would too. Can we see this landscape, please?
Let's see that.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's tired of sitting up there.
Okay.
Will you introduce yourself for the record? And oh, you just turned yourself off. Turn yourself back on again. Thank you.
Kim True from Suiting Design Landscape Architects.
Thank you. You'll be sending it over to there. And sending it over there. And flip ourselves. Thank you.
And this is looking at the first floor of Area A. And the existing off-site improvements landscape has been included, so you can see how that relates to the building. We're proposing a number of vines, looking at either a linus or a bougainvillea to define the arches and really enhance that State Street elevation and give it that quintessential Santa Barbara look along the front State Street building facade. Around the back side of the project here, facing Mission Creek, we have a number of native plants, as was mentioned before, proposed between the building and the creek area, and then a number of Mediterranean plants, palms, some tall, the Strelitzia, the giant bird of paradise. So really trying to reinforce the architecture and the height. In addition, we have one large tree proposed on the south elevation here where the building patios open up so that we have a beautiful trunk and some nice filtered shade coming in on the upper level patios. In addition, we're proposing some vines that will come up the articulation of that facade and the opening of that patio to create some color and definition there. And again, on the back side, sticking with the Mediterranean palette, the palms, more of the tough drought tolerance sort of Mediterranean plants. And on the upper floors, this is the central courtyard that the rooms open up to, and again the tree would be here and the vines coming up the side of the building and then spilling over the patio. And we have a number of potted plants proposed for the patios, and a series of 3 citrus trees in the raised planter between the patio decks, and some architectural foliage with Phoenix robelenii, a small palm tree, and some spilling vines coming out of the planter, softening those walls and providing some fragrance. And this is the 4th floor roof deck. And again, we're using a lot of potted plants, and they would be self-watering plants. And around the back side, around the pool, we have proposed a 42-inch tall hedge to sort of soften the edge of the pool deck. And this would be at a flush level with the roof, so that this planting area wouldn't really be seen from the State Street elevation above the red tile roofs. We would have a few of the potted plants, some large architectural foliage, a lot of color, plants spilling out of the pots, colorful glazed pots, and some vines on the back side here spilling down over the roof deck on the Mission Creek elevation to soften that facade there. And on the roof deck, again to soften. This is the very top of the roof deck above the California Hotel elevation. And again, with the low hedge up there to soften that, and using some of the spilling vine plants to spill down to the pool deck below to soften that elevation and create some interest and character in this area below. This is an area that we're not expecting, we're not providing a lot of big trees or anything large up here, but be a place for visitors to come and look out. We're not trying to create the village up there. But we are, supplying some color and some interest for that area there, again, with the architectural plants in the pots. And so this is the palette and the plants that we're looking for preliminary approval for today. Do we want to look at what we had done for area B and C at this point, or?
As long as we've got it integrated in the other part, why don't we look at that as well?
Okay.
I do have a question.
Oh, sure.
About this area A.
Okay.
Did you confer at all with the Mission Creek improvement? What they're doing there, they have some native plant palettes and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And
are you aware of what they're doing?
Yeah, and we're trying to tie this landscape in with the existing landscape that's here, and using the similar.
And there's some proposed landscape improvements too for the creek, I believe. Coming down the pipe.
The path and okay.
Right on the edge. So anyway, it could turn into a comment, but
okay.
Yeah, they have proposed improvements.
Okay, for the creek bank itself.
Exactly.
Okay, yes, I am aware of that project, and we'll look into that.
Question on all those other levels gardens, those are not going to be viewed by the public. Those are mostly just for the private use of the hotel.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
So really primarily this is what
That's correct.
All right, let's go through B and C.
Mm-hmm. Is this your, is that? Okay. I have, Mr. Adams would like to see our plant palette. For area B. Again, we're working with some shade trees. Keep in mind this central area here is going to basically be a green roof. So we're going to have the raised planters because we're over a parking deck. So we're going to have raised planters. And so we're again trying to use a lot of palm trees. We can't use some large trees that would weigh too much or would need too much room. So we're trying to work with a lot of large, bold tropical plants, again, like the Strelitzia nicolai, the giant bird of paradise, to reinforce the architecture on the building, and using plants that will spill over the planters and create a lot of interest with the subtropical type foliage, a lot of palm trees. Again, citrus trees in pots and small multi-branched olive trees. They stay in the 20-foot range so that they can be supported in this area. We're also looking at using very rich materials in the paseo so that it has a very nice pedestrian feel, and then again softened by the plants, punctuated with glazed pots and foliage. And again, the State Street planting is provided and the approved, just for your information. And there's a number of fountains in here. And this area is a focal point. And then C. On area C, it's some of our landscape's not shown on this plan, but we are proposing some large trees here in the raised planter boxes, and these could serve as seat walls as well. And these are supported on the columns of the parking structure below. And we're also looking at proposing a lawn area here that could be used by the public for picnicking if there's restaurants. And also this may be incorporated into our stormwater quality management for the project. The columns on this area, we had a number of pots proposed here, again with vines to soften and reinforce the arches, and the colorful glazed pots. Some of these raised planters would be planted with vines and spilling plants, again the architectural foliage. So we're really trying to keep the plant palette of the three projects similar so that it enhances the experience and makes it feel like one project. And on the roof decks, again, we had a similar plant palette to what you saw on Area B with the potted plants. And they're not shown here, but we would be using them on the trellises and the arbors to create some interest and shade. And we had a number of these planter areas here would be planted with some architectural foliage and some low ground cover in this area. And since this is south-facing, we'll be looking at mostly succulent ground covers and succulent accent plants to take the reflective heat from that area and provide some color and texture.
Thank you.
And I think that's it for our landscape. Are there any more questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
To the plaza.
If you don't mind, I'm going to take public comment because that would be the normal course of things. Can I just take the public comment for the landscape, please?
Just very quickly. Tom DeForest, the landscape looks fine. I don't know how that dependence on giant bird of paradise, they can get pretty ratty. It needs some attention. But on the section C, the terrace, I would like to defer to Commissioner Adams about the use of a lawn in Santa Barbara, that's not being encouraged now in Santa Barbara. And maybe maybe he can suggest another kind of ground cover. Also, I think for a terrace of this size, it definitely needs a number of shade canopy trees to provide shade. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forrest. I will now take questions from the Commission regarding the landscape.
First of all, I wanted to find out what is your vision of this plaza? What, if you envision a person using this plaza, what do you want them to do? I mean, as far as street furniture, the view, what is the experience you're trying to have them have? The mountains, or because you keep saying pedestrian, are these people walking around or sitting around, or?
I think in this area here, I envision somebody walking down State Street and finding this inviting plaza, and I could see them coming in and wanting to spend some time there and look in the shops, grab a sandwich, sit and eat, watch the children. There will be some site furnishings that we're proposing in this area here, and these are shade canopy trees, so that there would be shade for the seating areas that are proposed in this area. We didn't really know we were going to be presenting the landscape, so we don't have the final drawings for this portion. So I'm just describing to you what we have proposed from the last go-around that you saw last time in November, or we did have the seating and the planting. So we're really seeing this as a public space. There's going to be the Children's Museum nearby. So I think there's going to be a lot of activity, a lot of people, both that are using this hotel and the general public, residents of Santa Barbara and people visiting, walking up and down State Street.
Any further questions?
Yeah, you're proposing a water for that plaza. What happens with that? What kind of water feature? Is it very passive, or is it active, or are you just kind of thinking it through?
I think that it's going to be active, and so we're going to have some jets and some sound, so that this is going to really create some background noise and enhance the feeling of the space there.
Then the other question I have, particularly on Area C, what are the trees you're using, sort of on Helena? What kind of size and shape or
those are on
what's happening
Those
here?
are on the off-site plans, and do you have? Oh, good. I know we have jacarandas out along State Street.
Yeah, just kind of want a general character description of.
There we go. Podium. So it looks like we're using a spathipodium back there. So we're
So medium-sized
medium
canopy
size
trees.
canopy trees. Yes,
Okay.
with some flowering. Yes.
And the other question I have, in this area here, was there any discussion on alternatives to using turf there? What was that process?
We did actually start out with more of a Mediterranean garden, sort of an herb garden sort of thing there. And the more we thought about it, if this is a public open space, it would be really nice to actually have a park element in it, like a lawn. And I know water conservation is a big issue, as it should be. But we felt that this is the sort of place where you would actually use lawn, where it would be usable, where children could play on it, people could sit on it and picnic in this area. We're also considering using native grasses or some other type of a lawn that would use less water, so you can still have the ability for people to sit on it and use this space rather than using something like a marathon too that might need a little bit more water. And if it's part of our bioswale component, if it's part of our stormwater management, it's nice to have that filtration element there.
I like the lawn idea. I mean, I know it kind of goes against the drought-tolerant thinking, but when you think about the space in terms of the urban context, lawn just says, hey, come over, this is public, let's go sit on it. And I think you guys might consider that may outweigh the negativity of the drought issue in this one particular civic situation. Anyway, my thought on that.
And really, looking at the historic El Paseo is there's a lot of the Guerra Plaza, some of the really important public plazas in Santa Barbara do have lawn, and it's an important component.
Are there any further questions from the commission? If there are none, I want to go to comments now. And if you will address yourselves to the mass bulk and scale regarding the conceptual and, of course, on the preliminary approval of Area A, you may go further.
I think we should go from the big to the small and try to see where we agree and we can move forward, and then try to narrow down the points of where there's not consensus and try to resolve those. I believe the Area A is, maybe you can concentrate discussion on Area A and try to get a preliminary out of that. And I think it's what we have seen. I only have one comment, and I would like to ask the rest of the commission if they share that comment. If we can show the elevation of Area A.
Okay, that'd be great.
It should be in the front somewhere. The only question I have is, I don't, it's been a while, just seen from here, which is not obviously the way you would look at a building, especially like that, it seems like this area seems small. It seems like the proportions of, the size and the top, in general, those proportions are a little bit different. Like it seems to be lower and so forth. That's something that could be done in progress or for the final. But that's all I have around Area A. And those are my comments for Area A. I think it's what we've seen before. There's no reason why we could not get a preliminary approval.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, this is kind of the last. Is Area A, let's say you were going to move to construction, is Area A the first project? The first thing, the hotel? Because I forgot to mention this, but earlier there was some vandalism and all this stuff going on, and we were saying, well, good, instead of addressing the vandalism, couldn't you just move this project forward? So is that the plan to start that right away, so the vandalism and the integrity of the hotel is?
The original phasing of the project, and when we introduced the SCD, we said that the phasing would remain the same for now, was C, B, and then A. Now, that was always the case in the previous entitlements, and in the SCD we decided to keep that phasing for now. I know that there have been, there's a notice out on the Californian Hotel, and that's a separate issue. It's not part of this review really, but so there are some minimal work being done there to keep the building safer. I know that the owners have already started addressing it. They've cleaned out the building, keep it less accessible for vandalism. But as far as I know, the construction of Area A isn't necessarily, the final construction of Area A isn't necessarily being first. It is not.
Comments regarding project?
I have some problems with that two-story window in the new portion.
Area A?
Yes.
The new addition.
It just seems out of whack with the whole area. And I understand in a way why you're doing it, because it is different from the rest of the fenestration in that area. But there's just something about it being so much bigger than the entrance.
Thank you.
We could take a look at that.
Any other comments?
Yeah, Area A, and this is to the landscape architects. Let's see, you should really have, somehow confer with the Mission Creek improvement people and just coordinate with them, especially on that, as your landscape moves down to the creek bank. And then the other thing I noticed on Area A is you're locating Eucalyptus citriodora, a lemon-scented gum, which is the tall tree. It looks like on a deck, or maybe it's on the ground level.
It's on the ground level, that's correct, between the two buildings.
Yeah, you just want to be careful that has enough space and enough soil around to be a successful choice. And I think the plant palette is fine. I think with special deference on this part of the project toward using the California sycamore or the western sycamore, the Platanus racemose is going to be a good tree for back of this project. It's going to scale well with the project. And you might even want to see where you can integrate that a little bit around the sides, and instead of keeping just riparian just in the back. You might want to look at some echoes on the side areas of some riparian. So it's not just one plane, but just reverberates a little bit around the building, so it integrates better. So.
Any other comments? I think we must be considered on just Area A at the moment.
I don't have a problem with the area. I do believe that, is this set back a little bit from these two buildings, this middle one?
Yes, it is. More, well, it's actually separated from both by 5 feet on the south and by a niche.
But I'm in the front.
It's on the property line.
Right on the property line. So I think since that is sort of a connector building, I think it should have windows and treatment that is subordinate to the main building, I think. So I think it's good. It behooves for you to look at that window. My biggest concern, and something I really would like to put, is I think all along this Californian Hotel has been the sort of what the city was getting from this project, and I really would like to see the Area A move forward as a project one because of the integrity of the hotel and the damage and all these things, and I think doing that the Area A first really arranges the priorities, that how much that part is important, and all the new things that you're adding and to the facade will give this project that sense of the community priority, and then the other ones will then follow with it. I just think that is really a good thing for the city. And especially all this long time that this project has undergone, it's just a good statement to take this and put it in a new direction. So that's my only comment. Otherwise, for me, it's ready to be given a preliminary approval for Area A.
Any other comments?
I agree that it's ready for preliminary.
I'm going to summarize the comments, if I may. There has been an expression that there would be a desire on the part of this commission. I don't know if everyone agrees, but I'm going to express it this way, that in order to reflect our desire for this to reflect a community priority, that Area A be phased ahead of the other areas, that this State Street elevation in Area A, the new addition, reflect its position as a more subordinate aspect to the existing building of the California facade, and that you explore reproportioning the glazing to the plaster. And thirdly, that there's been a suggestion, thirdly, that the plant palette has been considered acceptable, that you consider using Platanus racemosa in various areas, including in the riparian areas. I'll ask for a motion of preliminary.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Chair?
Yes?
We would like to review the landscape plan along with the Mission Creek plant palette, just to ensure that that is consistent. So I wasn't sure if your motion was for
So I will
preliminary
add that to
approval.
the motion, that you will integrate your landscape plan with the Mission Creek improvement.
And also, we did have a request from the adjacent property to take a look at the very south corner of the building, which has come encroached a little closer to State Street.
Go back to where you were.
It's just this area right here. We believe that it's changed over what was given preliminary approval previously. And
So we would like to study that a little bit further.
Would you like to study it, or would you like them to study it?
We would like to work with them to come to a mutually agreeable, yeah.
But is that something that's my motion or your request? I mean, it's not something.
Right, it's something that staff will be looking
I
at,
see.
and so if you would consider that in your motion, that could be studied further.
So I'll add to the motion that applicant will verify with staff that the footprint is consistent with the previously approved project. Is that good?
Yeah, I actually think it is, but
All those in favor of this motion as amended?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries. Would
Thank
like
you.
comments on B and C?
Yes, of course.
Yes.
no.
We'd like it to.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, he can go to the, especially those two elevations. I like what you've done with the Mason Street elevation, simply because when buildings get this long, I think it's important to create what you've done in the other version, which is some hierarchy. You have to see, well, what is the entrance? Because otherwise, it could go on, and and I'll bring that up on the next building.
I'd like to get the new elevation up of
Where's the new one?
talking about it. Which elevation are we
The
looking
new
for?
one.
The new Mason Street.
One more. Very good.
Yeah, no, I think that's I think that rearrangement, I think, is successful. I try to identify the center and pieces, and I think you're moving in that direction. I like the tile. It kind of conflicts a little bit with the landscape. I mean, you have all this beautiful tile, and then you put a
Hedge in front of it.
The hedge in front is trying to figure that out. Seems like a waste of money on the tile. But so those are details. I agree with the comment with Mr. DeForest's comment on the trellis there. It does seem a little bit kind of like an add-on, but maybe it's the way it's drawn. I'm not sure how you see it in perspective, because I know it's more centered in the deck, and I'm not sure if you can see it from the ground. But sometimes those trellises on top of things look odd. I agree with my colleagues about the Henry Island and the Californian Hotel and so forth. That's and the landscape of Area B. I think it needs more landscaping, especially the Paseo. I mean, and also it needs. I think in both B and C. I can understand that it's in progress. You're not really. You're kind of working your way, and it. It does show. It seems like it needs more to happen. Not just quantity, but sometimes purpose. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Any additional comments or?
I have some comments. I'm just going to jump in Area B. Yeah, I also feel that trellis is isolated and it should be integrated. I appreciate the efforts to minimize that, but it just seems like a sore thumb that needs to be integrated better. Let's see, I appreciate the widening of that central corridor of Area B. I think on the, I'm going to make a comment regarding the Mason Street elevation, where you step the building back just a couple of feet to give some relief. And this comment is directed to landscape and the architect. Is I would like to see that line. It's a lot of plaster massing on that line, and as long as it steps back, I'd like to see an integration of perhaps a colorful vine or something that could be trained instead of just over arches. Maybe soften that line a little bit. I think that would integrate it better. This is a general comment to the landscape. I think the landscape palettes for both B and C need more succulents. And the other general comment for B and C is where you're using the giant bird of paradise. Those have to be used in a spot where they're very wind protected. When wind gets to them, it tears them up. I'd also like to see, if you're going to use the giant bird of paradise, you also use the smaller, regular bird of paradise, if you will.
Yeah, okay.
Let me ask the architect something. As part of the program for the hotel, is there any kind of food service or restaurant as part of the hotel?
We do anticipate on Area C's, one of the commercial spaces could potentially be a restaurant, and what we've allocated, if it were to function as a restaurant,
And up here as well.
a prep kitchen on the second floor that could service the hotel use a lot simpler, a lot faster without having to necessarily go through the main kitchen area downstairs.
Okay, this is just a thought. If you're going to have a restaurant, especially if associated with the hotel, find an opportunity for a fresh herb garden somewhere as part of the landscaping. They don't take up a lot of space, but that could be an opportunity. And I will save my comments for Area C for a little bit until we hear more about Area B.
Any other comments about B?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I've been giving this a lot of thought lately, and this, along with a lot of other buildings in town, maybe not as much for this project, but tends to be busy just to be busy. Now, we did bring this up last time, and not every building is a village where it's composed of a lot of structures. I look at the district attorney's building on Santa Barbara Street, and I realize it's set back a small distance from the back of the sidewalk. But that, to me, is an elegant, very large building that you drive by and you really don't notice it. And I've been trying to think to myself, why is it? What is it about that building that you don't see it? And it's very massive. And I'm convinced because it wasn't designed to be broken up into a lot of small buildings. and or varied roof heights and chimneys and all that stuff. It has windows that are the same module essentially as a hotel would have, and yet we work really hard at trying to make it very, very busy for really, I ask myself, for what reason? It's certainly more expensive. So I like everybody to think about that. Maybe not, I mean, this project's gone down the road a long way, obviously, and a lot of people have commented on it, and we have a packet of stuff to read we haven't even begun to think about. But for future projects, I like to look at the DA's building and say that is really what Santa Barbara should be for a very large building.
Thank you.
As far as this is concerned, I still think you need more queuing area on Mason Street, just like we talked about before. A porte cochere is very important, even in Santa Barbara where it does rain. And the item of overall simplicity. That's it.
Yes.
I really thank Don Shar for articulating what he said about the architecture, because I too have been thinking a lot about this project and this particular Area B. And it's not that I don't like it, and you see all these things, and yeah, this is very Santa Barbara. But what is it that it just seemed like? What is it that makes it just seem so bigger and I've walked several times before this project on Chapala 1. I kept going back and forth on that building, and I said, why is it? I mean, the height is high, yes, but other buildings are high in Santa Barbara. What is it about this building that everyone dislikes? And I think it's because of all those many elements in it. There are just too many. They're really, and they're broken up and back and forth and pots and this. I mean, there are literally every element of the Spanish architecture is in that building. And I think that is what creates its massiveness. Now, you go by and look at the Arlington, huge building, and it's smooth. It just wants you to get close to it, wants you to wrap your arms around it. And that is precisely what I'm feeling about this Area B. It's way over dramatized compared to the Californian Hotel. It just has everything, which is for a hotel, that's probably what you need. But I too have this, and thank goodness, I mean, Don Sharp has articulated it, and that's really what it is. It's a big building that you can go by and it looms at you, and you know what it is, and that's it. It can be that way too, because you have the Californian Hotel to see all that stuff. You know, it's there. So why compete with the two buildings? Anyway, that's just a general comment. Yeah, you're all done along the way. You have all your reasons for it. I'm not against anything. I'm just thinking on that sort of a philosophical level.
Madam Chair?
Yes, and I would just remind the Commission that we still have Area C to do, and I'm already behind. So if we can shorten up a little bit.
I agree with the last two comments. And as I say, this one has come along so far, and that it is a hotel, and I understand all that. But there is something about a nice swatch of just beautiful wall. And we see less and less of that.
Thank you. I will add my comments. I have not been thinking that much about this, but when I did see the revised elevation, I did prefer the previous elevation for its simplicity, and that was my initial reaction. And I think whenever you move a building back 2 feet, you know what you're doing. You're not doing it for a function. You're doing it for a trick and a manipulation of facades. And once you see that 2 feet, you know there's something bad happening. So I will summarize these comments. Oh.
Maybe we should give the applicant direction as to which of the two elevations we would prefer. Or
I will take a straw vote then. Those who would prefer the previous elevation for Area B, please raise your hands.
See that on the,
Put them both back up. There's the two perspectives. Well, we can't really show those both at once.
It's there.
That's
Madam
the old
Chair,
one.
I
Take that and put it over here.
But my comment on the previous one, it doesn't seem to have enough hierarchy, definition of entrance. I mean, that was the only thing. I'm not saying that the 3 arches are better than the 4, nothing like that. It's just simply like there's some a stronger intent of defining the entrance on the second one. Albeit it's true that it makes it overly complicated, and I totally agree with that.
So you would prefer that we keep the same lobby entrance definition we created in the second rendering. However, the second and third floor elevation should reflect a simplified version that was on the previous proposed elevation.
That's what I was.
A combination of both.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is what is not clear on the Mason Street elevation is where exactly is the front door. I mean, I think that portion of that arcade doesn't quite work. It's not as strong. But I agree with the other comments that the other one is overly complicated, perhaps for no special reason. I'm sorry if I'm confusing things, but I think
Well, then I will not take a straw vote. I think, it is simply our direction on this that you refer back to the simplicity that you began with on the previous elevation. That at least one commissioner feels that a redefinition of the entry should be part of that simplicity. That, in addition, there has been some comment regarding the trellis, that it be further integrated into what you're doing up there, and that there is comment regarding preference for more landscape in this Area B, as well as perhaps the suggestion of the use of more succulents and perhaps the use of an herb garden. Pardon?
That was for Area C.
No,
Yeah,
it was
that was
kind of both.
The area C or B,
Or
just inaccessible. So I'm sorry, I jumped to C a little bit.
Okay. Can we move to Area B then? C, sorry. Who would like to start on Area C? Yes.
Staff does have a comment on this drawing. Could you please turn your sheet to the second to last sheet, CA 820, please?
Well, you got it right away. Very
Got
good.
lucky.
Yeah.
Somebody that's walking up State Street, it's maybe a block or half a block still to go to get to this project, is probably going to see those cabanas. So I was wondering if the trick we've done on the Riviera to kind of lessen the impact of solar panels on houses from a distance is to put the solar panels below the tile, so that you still have the tile terminating against the sky, and the solar panels then just read like shadow lines below it. You don't really see them. So it's just one food for thought during your discussion is perhaps switching that line of solar panels to the lower end so that you don't see the metal against the sky. You'll see red tile against the sky. And that's all I got.
Thank you. May I have comments on Area C from the commissioners?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in with a few comments. Okay, on the Helena back of House Street, if you will, from the point of view of State Street. And we can see it actually on the 3D rendering that you have.
Would you rather look at that, Robert?
Yeah, let's go here. Oh, sorry.
They're underneath.
Okay. This right here, back there, behind the structure, that's going to be a big opportunity to use a skyline tree instead of a medium canopy tree. I think it would be a good idea to soften that building behind, finding an opportunity, and I don't want to design anything for anybody, but I'm just going to say a skyline palm or a skyline tree. It's a big opportunity I'd hate to see miss.
Along Helena Street, behind the building.
Yeah, behind this project.
Are you saying to soften the Beacons building that's above and beyond?
Use landscaping that's going to look good with your massing and perhaps get an opportunity to soften that elevation of that building. That's all I'm saying. As far as the plaza is concerned, this is a huge opportunity, and you have a wonderful opportunity here. I would just say the paving detail as conceptually shown on State Street and I believe Mason. That could be an opportunity for a temporary public art installation, a public art thing. I mean, somehow, and again, I understand it's private property, but it's such a public corner. There should be some opportunity, if and when there might be a temporary art installation there, that could happen. And obviously they've done that on State Street with different hardware underneath the paving. The other...
Excuse me, Robert, are you thinking here?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly somewhere in there or somewhere. It's a very important corner, and I just would hate to see any opportunity like that precluded. Just set it up that way so it could happen. I actually like the radial paving pattern there. But anyway, let's talk about the center of the plaza for a second. This is a great opportunity, and actually I'd like the team to look up a project in Palm Desert. It's a shopping center called the Water Gardens. And they have actually a central plaza that people can sit and walk through that provides an opportunity for drainage. It's absolutely magical. It's pretty low planting. They use a lot of palms, but it's really interesting. So even if you really wanted to use a lawn that you think people could use, I think the edges could be creatively dealt with a variety of plant material. What I'm not feeling, I'm feeling like it's just a plain boring lawn, and maybe a grand lawn, if you will. And I just want the team to look at this great opportunity for that. I like the canopy trees in the center, I just enjoyed some moments at a very active fountain at the Music Center in Los Angeles, and it's absolutely fun to be there, and it's done in a simple way. The central fountain, there's jets that shoot up from the ground. I'm not saying that that's right or anything, but I'm just saying that a water feature could be a place to really bring people in a somewhat active way. And again, I know you have to be safe about these things, but some kind of fun water feature, that's also a great opportunity there. And I think as you look at the State Street elevation, I think this this area, this visitor center elevation, that just needs more work.
That's historical.
Is it historical? Okay, so I'll withdraw comments. I just see those fins moving over it, and I think something better could be done. Yeah.
You'll mess with that,
So,
Robert.
right.
Any further comments regarding Area C?
I just have one comment, something to say. I just wonder how long it's going to be before there's a request to put a fence and a gate across this.
Never.
This is a public plaza as drawn.
Well, we've gotten so many of those. I'm not saying I think it's a good idea. I'm just saying that it could happen.
Yes, only if you were to dedicate it to the public would you be able to say that.
Say that, right. Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm.
I have some comments.
Yes, Joe.
Yeah, this seems to be like the easiest building, the one with the least amount of side, the most plus and so forth. Mm-hmm. But I regret to say this is my least favorite of them all. I see the one that I really having some architectural problems. Nothing that has to do with changing the site plan or anything like that. It just seems like it needs something. Starting on the Mason Street elevation, for instance, we can go, yeah, that's the one right there, right? Yeah, that's where the comment of Mr. Sharp's comment comes, you know, like you can, the function here is exactly the same as the function here. So there is no reason why, you know, they could not be unified and simplified and that kind of a thing. Also, there are also designs. I mean, I think the overcomplication of this corner is it doesn't work for me. It seems like the main feature there is that tower. You're putting a lot into that tower, but it's not big enough, or it's not strong enough, and competes with so many other things that, as a tower element, it gets lost. As in the Casa de la Raza, the tower takes over and it's the element. You see, but here there's just so much stuff around that it kind of gets lost. So it doesn't work. I mean, at least for me, it's another complication that doesn't. The perspective at the end. Right? Where is the?
Where is that?
Oh, it's right. It should be here, right? Yeah, here we go. Yeah. Yeah, it's just this lot of stuff in here that I don't know. It just seems like some simplification of that it would work. Also, on the second floor here is a different element. They're using the same arches here as here. As the first floor and the second floor, at least, very much similar to that.
Elevation for that.
I don't think it's such a great idea to do that. Plus again, the complication of I think it could be simplified, and it's just it has something that I think this is still under design. I imagine that you're still experimenting and you haven't really quite arrived to. I understand the idea of an open plaza. I kind of like the idea of the green grass being a serenity, like the La Guerra Plaza is kind of that. Feel like it's quiet, and even though it's obviously not something that we want to promote, it's just one little space in that part of town, could work, but it's not very clear on that big space that even the proportion of grass to it doesn't seem to be worked out completely. Maybe it needs the water fountain, the river rafting, the white water rafting, whatever it is. But it does something. It's not there yet, and I think it really needs a lot of work still at that. The architecture in architectural terms. So that's my take. I think you asked the question about the rear elevation. I kind of like this because it does remind me of other parts of town, or other parts of Southern California, where you ride the train and you see the old factories, and it's soothing. It's kind of like simple. I kind of like that. I prefer that.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Sharp.
I said this last time, and I still believe it to be true. And I'm against having a plaza this large, which is obviously over a parking structure with no ability to change elevation and make it interesting. I know you can plant 4 big palm trees, but it's still a very urban area in a city that tries not to be urban. And there's no serendipity, there's no little mystery, there's no El Paseo feeling where you're turning the corner and finding something exciting. It's just one big flat area that is very impersonal to me. I thank Commissioner Peugeot for speaking up again about the not having the need for having so much going on, trying to pretend that there's different things going on behind each opening when it's all the same structure. And the simplification is, I think, really important, again, on this as well as the other building.
Thank you. Any further comments? I will add my comments with Mr. Sharp so that it's not just one person speaking. I actually have a problem with that plaza being quite so large and quite so as he puts it, urban. I'm actually looking and would prefer for Santa Barbara more of a mystery, more of a cloister, more of a discovery happening from the street. This reminds me of Palm Springs or something like that, where there's just a huge expanse of commercial and hardscape. I don't care how many trees you put in there. It's too obvious, it's too businesslike, it's too commercial, it's too much. I will summarize the comments. In general, we're urging you to please apply simplicity and simplification to the elevations. There's been a comment regarding the railroad track elevation, somewhat embodying that feeling. There's been a request for a skyline tree at the Helena elevation. Skyline trees. And more landscaping in general, I expect. There's been a request for looking at the opportunities of temporary art installations and water features. There are at least 2 commissioners who feel that the plaza should be reevaluated.
Make that 3 commissioners, because that is exactly the point I was driving at, and they articulated it much better.
There's a majority of commissioners that is feeling uncomfortable with the expression and the way that building approaches the street and pedestrians.
I would want it different. We need more suburban. Something you drive through and you see all this as opposed to discover it.
I guess I'm looking for a motion with those comments.
I'd say continue. I'll make a motion to continue with those comments for 2 weeks or indefinite.
I'll bet.
Indefinite. To continue indefinite. To with the comments that we made.
Second. I'm sorry, but the applicant said 4 weeks.
Yes.
Mr. Adams said indefinitely.
I think once we're into 4 weeks, are we not into indefinite?
I think we are.
You can take indefinite, and then if you know you want it in 4 weeks, you can let us know in enough time.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That motion carries. Thank you very much for a very thorough. I really appreciate a very thorough and complete presentation. It makes our job a lot easier. I really commend you for this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I know we're running late, but could we take a short break?
Oh, the way you say it, Louise, it's hard to say no. Let's take a 5-minute break, please. Thank you. Ooh.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's a big project to review.
Will you introduce yourselves for the record? And sorry, thank you.
I'm Dawn Seamer. I'm a designer with KBZ Architects.
Richard Christian, architect with KBZ also.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just as a little bit of background, this was built in 1928. It was originally the J.J. Allen Garage. It was a public parking garage. Of course, they made it perfect for the muffler shop because it already had the access to the street. I've got, in case you want to see them, I do have the original elevation plans. I don't believe you're doing much of a change on the elevation, but we'll have to wait and see. But if you want to compare it to the original, I do have it.
Thank you.
Nice and crispy.
I don't miss all that ammonia.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are working with the fire department to provide administrative offices in the pretty much the eastern half of the old muffler shop. And as you know, Fire Station number 1 was recently renovated. And there originally were 3 lots. Were Fire Station number 1, the old muffler shop, and then the parking lot to the south. And they have since been merged into one lot. And we're kind of treating this as now a campus, so we want to have the fire station field integrated somewhat with the administrative offices. I'll turn the page here. Try to explain the use of the facility. If you go to page 2.2, it shows the floor plan. And you can see we have offices along the Chapala Street elevation, and then a central core with a conference room and work area, and then along the dividing wall between what we're calling the annex and the administration area, more offices and restrooms. The existing garage doors, which are in the two center archways, we are proposing to replace with storefront. And the main entry will be located in the one arch towards the north. And then the two side windows that are currently wood frame windows will be replaced with aluminum storefront as well. There are existing two large skylights in the administration side. We will be replacing them slightly, making them slightly smaller, and then adding two additional skylights. There's not much in the way of natural light from windows in the administration area, so we're trying to bring in more natural light through skylights. The western half, which is the annex, is currently being used as a warehouse by the fire department, and it'll continue to be used as a storage warehouse area. I flip back to up here. A1.1 has an enlarged plan of the site, and we will be improving the parking lot to the south and adding a secondary exit off of the administration with a ramp leading up to it. The sidewalk we're proposing to replace and follow the Chapala Street guidelines. So that's pretty much an overview. A3.3 shows the exterior elevations. Yeah. Elevation number 1, the east elevation, shows the entry, and what this element is here in the center is a medallion, and that was inspired by the original photographs of the old fire station, which I will show you here. I went to the Historical Museum and looked the building up, and you can see here's the parking garage, and then here's the original fire station next door, and here's another shot of the fire station before the garage was built. The fire station had a medallion on it, so that was the thinking of adding one to this front facade. So I asked the fire department what was symbolic for them, and it's the Maltese cross. It has these elements here. So that's what we're proposing. We have 3 exterior light fixtures in the front, and then some additional around the sides, and 1 pole light. I think in your package you have cut sheets of 2 of the light fixtures. We're going for LEED Silver certification, so I'm in the process of verifying that the light fixtures do indeed meet the dark sky requirements, so I'm in the process of that. We were requested to add a rolling gate for security. That shows, sorry, I keep flipping around. On A1.1, the location is here on the corner, the southwest corner of the building. Keynote 18 is pointing to it. It is shown, and then obviously it's shown in elevation here on 3. We've brought more detailed drawings of the gate if you're interested. It's not in your package, but we have them here.
Yes.
Way back.
It's at the back corner of this building.
Right. I believe that's it as far as describing the project.
Thank you. Is there any public comment regarding this project? Seeing none, I'll ask for questions from the commission.
Yeah, I had a question about, you referred to aluminum. Are they anodized or are they powder coated or?
They're powder coated, and we're using the same colors that we used on fire station number 1. So it's this sort of brick red, and then this off-white paint color for the building.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Dawn, are you going to be providing a landscape plan for the parking lot?
Yes.
Okay, because you have some shrubs labeled,
Right.
but it needs a whole lot more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Question.
sure.
How do you deal with that wall that intersects the storefront? You have it drawn in plan as a thick mullion, and then it kind of disappears.
On the floor plan.
Yeah, like right there. Like that would be like a,
Yeah.
7-inch mullion or something like that. Right? Like if that's.
Let's go to 2.2.
Right there.
Right there.
That
Yeah.
one, yeah.
Do you have that? Yeah.
So how does that work in elevation and kind of messes up your symmetry a little bit?
I know.
Well, yes.
The space plan is really had a lot of discussions on that.
This would be that detail. This mullion would be the width that we're using for all of the verticals.
Well, that's very smart. So you basically you leave it like a gap. You should put the wall behind and this thing in front.
Yes. Yes.
I see. So using the 4-inch studs.
The thickness of those would be similar to what's used there.
Okay, and regarding the storefront, you do have some solid panels in the, let's say,
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out where, like here you have, you put glass on, is it glass or not? Yeah.
You know what?
That's supposed to be glass, right?
That's glass. Yeah. I don't know.
But you do have something there, right? Like, let's
Yeah.
say it's solid, it will be what, like one of these guys?
This one,
Yeah.
yeah, because we do have the ceiling of an office directly behind that.
We're trying to inside maintain the existing truss, so we have a lid on
So
all
you
of the
have an
offices.
inside and an outside, and they
Yes.
not totally get along that well.
Yeah, it was a great idea when we started. And then
So, but if you have the light on downstairs and not upstairs, how does that work? Like from the inside, like like the attic is not going to have light, right? It's going to be dark, and then you.
It will.
we
it will
are,
have
yeah,
that. We have some uplights that will be
Lining it.
illuminating the trusses and the ceiling.
yeah.
Not to the extent that the offices will.
Because there's a lot of area that's not within the contained offices that will be used, so that's the general illumination for that.
Okay, and being that, if you don't mind me asking so many questions, right? Like this is what, like, that line is what, like 24, 30, 36 inches?
36, because we have
36.
desks right up to it, so I didn't want to see all the stuff.
Okay. And you probably thought about continuing there, but you discarded because of, you didn't want to make the doors all the way up, and
Right.
you didn't want to do that because of the scale of the doors? Or?
Yeah, I thought this should read as the entry, so it's a little different than, this to me sort of highlighted that you walk in here. And it was somewhat trying to have some consistency between the two main arches. But and then it's really this one that's providing the function of hiding the furniture beyond.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Oops.
So,
Watch out. Do we have any other questions?
I do have one.
Yes.
This material is the same as that?
This is like a
This is
spandrel.
glass. This is on the side window. This is this
I'm
window.
talking down here. This is spandrel glass also?
No, that'll be
no,
metal
that's
panel.
metal. But
That's this section here.
this one is here, and that's the spandrel, right? Yeah.
Right. So this solid glazing panel is going to be, glazing meaning it goes in the glazing
Yeah.
Right.
situation in the
Yeah.
storefront, not as glass.
Yeah, we haven't really resolved what that material will be.
Yeah, I understand.
Any other questions? Seeing none, shall we take comments?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Steering.
On the parking lot, there is one triangular space back by the corner of the building that's painted white. Could that be a plant? That really should be a planter.
The trucks come and go
Come and
through
go
this,
through there.
so we're as tight as we can go.
That was sort of a question comment. Other comments, the parking lot needs a fully developed landscape plan.
Yes.
Okay. The chain link fence that is existing
Yes.
should be replaced with wrought iron to match the gate, the rolling gate. And then on the elevation, first of all, I applaud the adaptive reuse of this building. I think that's great. We need more of that, and this is always has been a neat building in my mind. The storefront system and the breakup where the door is placed and all of that is a little troubling to me, and I don't know why. And my best guess is that it's the lack of symmetry that's happening. You've got the door there, and I understand why. What's dictating it? It's your space planning, your floor plan. But I find it a little troubling and uncomfortable.
Any other comments?
Madam Chair,
Yes. Sure.
I am somewhat bothered by the storefront, the spandrel glass, the metal panels, evidently in the plan there's very little recess of all of this, and I guess that's because it's that way now, and you're just replacing that. But to my way of thinking, all of that is a little too slick for this building. And it's not in keeping with a restoration that I think the building deserves. That's all.
Thank you.
Yes. I like everything that's happening, but I agree with the comment about the storefront. I cannot put my finger on it. I think you're into something. I mean, you're trying to address it with the storefront like that, right? It seems like the symmetry is an important element of this elevation. I was looking at the original drawings, which are odd because don't really have a door. It has two doors, which is two is an odd representation. Usually it's 1 or 3 or 5 or something like that. So here that gives you, you got 2, and in one you come in, and the other one has all sorts of things. I'm not sure what the solution is. It's just it's not quite working. I mean, I'm not sure what to suggest, but I just don't see it completely well resolved. Maybe if they both were more similar to each other. I'm not sure how you can do that, but I know you try, but actually I don't think it's there yet. Maybe the breakups, maybe maybe the two. I think the more they retain the symmetry, the better they are. I think the better the building looks, in my opinion.
Any further comments?
Then there's also the issue of the secondary windows. I wonder if, also the other existing ones. These are the existing ones. No, let's scratch that.
I'm going to summarize. Oh, yes.
Chair, just one more comment. The shed roof on the little porch, it's off the parking lot there. It's just cantilevered out from the building, and I think that could be expressed a little bit with more importance and give it some substantiation and bulk to it rather than just hanging it off. If you want to hang something off of it, an awning would be more appropriate if you would do that.
Okay.
I'm going to summarize the comments. In general, there's concern regarding our preference for an expression of symmetry at the elevation with the arches, and also regarding how the storefront system is expressed and how you figure out the system that's going to make it work. There is a desire for a developed landscape plan, a request to replace the existing gate with a wrought iron gate to match the proposed fence. I'm sorry, replace the existing fence with a wrought iron fence to match the existing proposed gate. That you look again at your proposed shed roof and have I forgotten anything? Okay. I'll look for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Would you like 2 weeks or?
2 weeks, please.
Second? Did I hear a second?
I heard.
Oh, yes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That motion carries. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Not easy. Yes.
I'll take that motion. I'll second it. Thank you.
Adjourn.
Some advantage to being last.
Yeah.